What if the greatest tragedy in your life is not that you don't know who you are, but that you keep forgetting? Think about it. How many times have you promised yourself that tomorrow would be different? Tomorrow you'll wake up earlier, tomorrow you'll finally start that habit, tomorrow you'll become the person you've always wanted to be. And yet somehow tomorrow arrives and the same thoughts return, the same habits return, the same reactions return, and the same version of you quietly takes control once again. P.D. Ouspensky believed this was not a coincidence. He suggested that most human beings live in a strange state between waking and sleeping, moving through life automatically, repeating patterns, following habits, and reacting mechanically without ever truly being present. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack potential, but because they continuously forget themselves. They forget where their attention is, forget what they intended to do, forget what truly matters, and forget the simple fact that they are here. According to Ouspensky, this forgetting is the central problem of human life, because the moment you forget yourself, your conditioning takes over, your habits take over, your emotions take over, and another day slips by unnoticed, then another, until one day you realize you've been living the same day for years. But what if the person you've been searching for is not someone you need to become? What if it is someone you have simply forgotten? In this video, we'll explore Ouspensky's powerful idea of self-remembering, why human beings live mechanically, and how a simple shift in awareness may be the beginning of genuine awakening. Welcome to Until Awakening. Today we're going to explore a question that may completely change the way you see your mind, your identity, and the invisible patterns shaping your life. If you enjoy exploring ideas about awareness, consciousness, and personal transformation, consider subscribing and joining our growing community. Now take a slow breath, because every awakening begins with a moment of awareness, a moment just like this one. Ouspensky believed that one of the most uncomfortable truths about human life is also one of the easiest to observe. Most people do not live consciously, they live mechanically. At first, this idea may sound insulting. After all, we make decisions, form opinions, pursue goals, and believe we are in control of our lives. But Ouspensky challenged this assumption. He suggested that if we honestly observe ourselves, we may discover that much of what we call choice is actually habit. We wake up at the same time, follow the same routines, react to the same situations, experience the same emotions, and repeat the same patterns day after day. Someone says something we dislike, and we become irritated. A problem appears, and we become anxious. A familiar temptation appears, and we respond in exactly the same way we did yesterday. We believe we are acting freely, yet our reactions often unfold automatically before we are even aware of them. According to Ouspensky, this is what it means to live mechanically. Not that we are machines in a literal sense, but that much of our behavior is driven by conditioning, habits, impulses, and unconscious patterns that operate without our awareness. The unsettling implication is that most of the time we are not directing our lives. We are simply being carried along by forces within us that we rarely notice. And as long as this remains unseen, genuine change becomes almost impossible. If human beings live mechanically, then who exactly is operating the machine? Most of us assume there is a single, consistent I at the center of our experience. A stable self that makes decisions, forms intentions, and remains the same from one day to the next. But Ouspensky argued that this is an illusion. According to him, we are not one, we are many. Within each person exists a collection of different and often contradictory selves, each with its own desires, fears, opinions, and goals. One part of you wants to wake up early and exercise. Another wants to stay in bed. One part wants to save money. Another wants immediate pleasure. One part promises to change. Another part abandons the promise the next day. And because these different selves take turns controlling our attention, we experience the strange feeling of constantly changing our minds. The person who makes a decision in the morning is often not the same person who must carry it out in the evening. This is why lasting change can feel so difficult. One I makes the plan, but another I lives the consequences. Ouspensky believed that until we recognize this inner fragmentation, we will continue to believe we are acting from a unified will, when in reality, we are being pulled in different directions by forces within ourselves. The first step toward awakening is not creating a new self. It is becoming aware of the many selves that are already competing for control of your life. This idea leads to an important question. If we genuinely want to change, why do our efforts fail so often? Why do we make promises to ourselves only to break them days later? Why do we keep repeating patterns that we know are holding us back? According to Ouspensky, the problem is not a lack of desire. The problem is that there is no single, permanent self within us capable of maintaining that desire. One part of you decides to change, another part resists, a third part becomes distracted, a fourth part forgets the original intention altogether. As a result, our lives often become a series of unfinished beginnings. We make resolutions, create plans, feel inspired for a moment, and then gradually return to the same familiar behaviors. From the outside, it appears as though we lack discipline. But Ouspensky saw something deeper. He believed that most people are caught in a cycle of inner contradiction without even realizing it. Different impulses take control at different times, each believing itself to be the real I. This creates the illusion of choice while preventing genuine consistency. The result is a life that feels repetitive, predictable, and strangely difficult to transform. We may sincerely want a different future, yet we continue to recreate the same present. And until we become aware of this inner fragmentation, we remain trapped in patterns that seem to repeat themselves endlessly, no matter how strong our intentions may be. If mechanical living is the problem, what is the solution? Ouspensky believed it begins with a practice he called self-remembering. At first, the phrase sounds simple. After all, how could anyone forget themselves? We know our name, we know our history, we know who we are. But this is not the kind of remembering he was talking about. Self-remembering means becoming aware of yourself in the very moment you are living it. Right now, as you listen to these words, part of your attention is focused on the video. But are you also aware that you are here, listening? Are you aware of your own presence? Most of the time, our attention becomes completely absorbed by whatever is happening around us. We become lost in conversations, thoughts, emotions, plans, worries, and distractions. In those moments, we experience life, but we do not remember ourselves within it. Self-remembering is the act of bringing a portion of attention back to yourself, while remaining present to the world. It is the quiet recognition, I am here. Not as an idea, not as a belief, but as a direct experience. According to Ouspensky, this simple act creates a brief moment of awakening. For an instant, the automatic machinery slows down and something more conscious begins to appear. The challenge is that these moments rarely last. We remember ourselves for a few seconds, and then once again, we become lost in the flow of life. Yet each time we return, we strengthen the possibility of becoming truly awake. If self-remembering is the key, how do we actually practice it? Surprisingly, Ouspensky's answer was not complicated. He did not suggest retreating to a monastery or spending years studying philosophy. He suggested beginning with a simple act, remembering yourself in ordinary moments. As you walk down a street, pause for a second and recognize, I am here. While speaking to someone, notice not only the conversation, but also your own presence within it. While working, eating, driving, or waiting in line, briefly bring part of your attention back to yourself and silently acknowledge, I am here. At first, this may seem almost too simple to matter, but Ouspensky believed that its simplicity is exactly what makes it powerful. The difficulty is not performing the exercise, The difficulty is remembering to do it. Most people will remember themselves for a few seconds and then immediately become lost again in thoughts, emotions, and external events. This is why self-remembering is not a single achievement, but an ongoing practice. Each moment of remembering interrupts the mechanical flow of life. Each moment creates a small gap between awareness and habit. And over time, these brief moments begin to accumulate. What starts as a simple phrase, "I am here," can gradually become a doorway to a different way of living. A way of living with greater presence, greater consciousness, and a deeper connection to the reality of each moment. Perhaps the problem is not that you don't know who you are. Perhaps the problem is that you keep forgetting. Forgetting yourself in routines. Forgetting yourself in distractions. Forgetting yourself in endless thoughts about the past and the future. According to Ouspensky, awakening does not begin when you learn something new. It begins when you remember something that has been overlooked all along. The simple fact that you are here, right now, alive, aware, present. And perhaps that is why self-remembering is such a powerful idea, because it reminds us that consciousness is not something we must acquire from the outside. It is something we must learn to notice within ourselves. The next time you find yourself lost in thought, rushing through a routine, or reacting automatically to life, pause for a moment and remember yourself. Notice your presence. Notice that you are here. Sometimes, a single moment of awareness can interrupt years of unconscious living. And perhaps the awakening you have been searching for is not waiting somewhere in the future. Perhaps it is available in this very moment. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you found value in this video, please consider liking it and sharing it with someone who might need to hear this message today. And if you're interested in exploring consciousness, psychology, self-discovery, and the deeper dimensions of human potential, be sure to subscribe and join us on this journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, every awakening begins with a moment of awareness.